Hello YouTube friends, welcome to the Red Parrot channel. I am your host, Mary Ellen. This is an episode of Textile Thursday, which is my way of being able to do a video on Thursday and not feel obliged to go thrifting, because I'm trying to do a low spend 2023, and I decided that I would talk about textiles and the act of sewing and stitching and all that kind of stuff, which is really a large part, I think, of it is not a large part, it is a piece of junk journaling, and it's certainly something that I have an abiding love affair with. So I posted a short of me wearing a costume, and I was in a kilt, and I want to talk about that costume. But first, I need to do a video of why I made it in the first place. So I'm going to split this up into two parts. First video is going to be a background on the ICG, and we'll get more into what that is in a minute. And then the second part, if all you care about is me doing a show and tell and a deconstruction of that costume, will be in a second video. So if you are still with me, and I do hope you are, let's get started. So how do I want to start? Need a piece of paper, because you can't think without a piece of paper. And I got a pen, because I think it will make more sense if we draw this out. So you can have like a permanent sense of orientation. And just as an aside, it is really helpful to me, and I think to other people with cognitive issues, if you can always keep sort of a map of the entire environment and then where you are in that map. That's 100% what processes are for, what you are here, locator maps are for, and flow charts and so on and so forth. So huge fan, because it really helps me, and it also helps me communicate to others what on earth I'm talking about. So I started with ICG, and ICG is the International Costumers Guild. And guilds are put in place to support the learning and education and making and exploration of a particular area. So you have fiber guilds, weaving guilds, I'm sure there's woodworking guilds and so on and so forth. And this happens to be the International now Costumers Guild, and I will refer to it sometimes as ICG. So ICG, as any good organization has, is an overwhelming, an overarching umbrella. So you have sort of like the executive of the guild in its whole part. And then you have things called chapters. So this is a more local organization. So there's one for Toronto, there's one for, I think, Boston, there's one for Denver, I think there's one for Detroit. Where else? There would be one for Milwaukee. There's certainly California. There's probably more than one in California, because it is a center of costuming because of the movie industry. And so there are these chapters and so they have international, I think, because of Toronto, and I think there might be another Canadian one out west. I think there might be one in either Edmonton or Calgary. I'm not entirely sure. And I don't know, but I think there might be one in England or the UK, but I am not certain of that either. In any event, it's more than one country, so they get to say international, and I am fine by that. So these chapters, they get together and they do their things, and like just chapters do. And what they do, and let's do another banner. They do something called an annual, and this is an annual convention, and they call that Costume Con. And the XX is for the numbers. So Costume Con 23, Costume Con 40, Costume Con 37, and they're doing it in sequential order, except for the weird things that happened during the COVID pandemic. And that's where we might pick up our story a little bit later. But in a con, you sort of have the con split up into two different kinds of activities. You have the showing of costumes, and then you have the information exchanges. A costume con is usually around 4 days, 4 to 5 days. It is usually themed. So Costume Con 42, I think, is coming up in Denver, and their theme is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, because the number 42 is prominent in that book. They've had nautical themes, villains and heroes, whatever the Costume Con committee thinks of. And so what will happen is one or more of the chapters will say, okay, what's the next Costume Con coming up? And they will bid for it. And then at the current Costume Con, they'll say, okay, well, I think Milwaukee, we want to go to Milwaukee. So they get all the votes, and then 2 years hence, Milwaukee will host it. So they have sort of a 2-year rolling piece. I digress. Let's get back to what is in the Costume Con. So there is a showing of the costumes, because this is really a costuming guild, and anybody who makes certainly garments and things to wear, you want to have a place to wear it. And Costume Con is absolutely a place to show. So you would have something called hall costume. And I jokingly refer to that as, oh, this old thing. So they range from super simple to fairly complex, but they're usually a little chill. They're not quite the elaborate things that you would have at a masquerade level, but they certainly will span since we have been clothing human beings. So from Viking era all the way through historical paths across nations. So it doesn't matter. It's not necessarily a Western civilization thing. You can absolutely do, whatever realm makes most sense to you. You can 100% use the creative arts as a source. So that's books, movies, TV shows. You can make your own stuff. It doesn't matter. You put on something nice to wear and you create a hall costume. And then when you're wandering around the hotel, you may see somebody that is in your realm. So for example, I have a Professor Hooch Harry Potter referee costume. And when I'm wearing that, it's fun to see somebody who is another professor. And then we get together as a group, and we are sort of a group in that realm, and we get to talk to each other and say, oh, what I really love what you're wearing. And then, oh, this old thing. Oh, it's not nothing, but it's just sort of we get to completely nerd out about construction and all of the things related to costumes. So also for showing costumes, you have the science fiction and fantasy masquerade. And that is one of the premier show events. And so that is everybody who is making costumes that are of their own design or imagination, that is usually from the realm of masquerade. There is often a little skit that might go with it, something that's got a fun punchline, and it is just a really great opportunity to show off something that you've been making, sometimes for 2-3 years. Not everything is, okay, I'm gonna spend 2 weeks doing this. So you can if you want. That's totally okay. But there are an awful lot of I shouldn't say enough. There are costumers who will spend an inordinate amount of time on this because costuming is 100% their jam. So you have the science fiction and fantasy masquerade. You also have something called the historical masquerade. Now, if the science fiction and fantasy masquerade is you're just going to go on stage, show off your costume, maybe do a skit or something, the historical masquerade is a lot more intensive. So historical is connected to the history of textiles, the history of clothing, and there is a prejudging and a wear judging, and then what does that look like on the stage judging. So the historical masquerade has a prejudging where you will bring your garments to the panel and they will look inside. So did you hand stitch it? You know, what are the techniques that you're using? All of that kind of stuff. And this feels intensive. It feels really a lot if you're a beginner, and we don't have to start here. That's absolutely not the question. The historical masquerade is for the guild member who wants to participate in this. And obviously when you are doing this kind of intensive making, you are learning a lot across the process. So you're doing documentation and so on and so forth. So that's also really fun because, again, it sort of spans the history of time, and that's pretty fabulous. The next one is something called Future Fashion Folio. So before the convention happens, you can submit art drawings or fashion drawings. Do I have a spare piece of paper? Yes, I do. So you can think of like a modeling. We have a model, and let's say that we want to do something that is, I don't know, fish related. So that's the theme. And so what are we going to do? We are going to do a dress with a very large open collar like this. And then we are going to do that. And then we are going to do, you know, this kind of a skirt. There we are. And then we might, you know, have some kind of, you know, very pretty fabric decoration. And this might go like this. This might be the tulle of a sort of a skirt. And then we might have, you know, buttons that come down like this, and this sort of furled collar here. And so clearly what I have drawn is a fish, but it is also a piece of fashion that could be considered a coat. And we might call this, I don't know, fillet of perch overcoat. And I might give a story that has information about it. I haven't made anything. All I have done is designed it. So I will send that into the group, and then they will say, okay, here is 20 submissions. We will now open those submissions to anybody who is attending the conference, and with only this drawing as inspiration, go make it. So it doesn't have to be the designer that makes it. It could be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And so that's where the fun begins. Well, for costumers, it's like, oh, I really love that. I think that would be really fun. I can think about, you know, what the materials might be, what the colors might be. And then you have this future fashion folio masquerade, where you get to see all of these garments come to life. So that's what Future Folio is. And we are here, and then there's a couple more. So there is something called, let's call it static display. So in static display, there is often sort of a micro competition that they will put out. So that would be almost all of them have dolls. So there is, I think, the sort of the 18-inch sort of Barbie-ish kind of doll. I'm sure they have a name. I don't do it, but I love looking at them. And then it is in miniature, any one of these things here. So you would do something like dolls. You might have quilts that have some kind of established theme that is coming from here. So it's not just go make a quilt, but go make a quilt that looks like something else. So I was just scanning through one of the archives and saw that there was a quilt that was made to look like a bookcase with all of the books and so on and so forth in it. So it is not your grandma's quilt or your modern quilt for the purposes of creating a bed. It is an art quilt. You might have articles of clothing. So we've seen bras. So you decorate a bra. I've done a hat, which may be part of the Textile Thursday. I will show you how I did that. Shoes, whatever else. You sort of get the idea. And these are rotating. Not every convention has every one of these, but if it makes sense for this, you might have something that is here. And the last one is something called SPC, which is the single pattern competition. And this is one of the best competitions to select if you are new, you are tentative, you're a new sewer. Everybody plays along with this, and it is helpful in the sense of the host convention will release 3 or 4 different patterns, and you get to see them, let's say 8-9 months in advance of the convention, and then you make a costume based on those pattern pieces. Now there's a couple of different categories. There is make the pattern and change the textile. Don't make the pattern, make something completely different, but use the pattern pieces. And then there is sort of blends between the two. And then there is also techniques or styling. So I have seen somebody make a dress and put all of those little doodly eyeballs and cover the dress in that. I have seen people do quilting of a garment. I have seen people take patterns and look nothing like the pattern cover, but is using all of the pieces. So if you look closely at the pattern, you can see, oh, there's the pocket. It's just repeated 1,000 times and then folded into a petal, let's say. So that's, I think, it for the showing off. Then there's information exchanges. And we have things like panels where we all get together and we talk about something. So that might be, somebody might be an expert on featherworks or spinning or felting or any of those kinds of things. So we are going to get together. One that I wish that I had gone to, and if it ever comes around again, I totally want to, which is the history of dresses. So it is basically when we started clothing ourselves to date, and then just go through the time frame. So it's basically historical timeline. I'd love to know that. You have workshops. So you might have something, embroidery, You might have felting again. You might have knitting. You might have English paper piecing. Whatever anybody is available to get together, you usually pay a little bit extra, and that's for just materials. And they'll give you everything to be able to learn the technique. Also very valuable. You have a what do I want to call it? A local tours. So often they will have maybe a textile museum. You might go to some fabric stores. There might be a fashion district. There is going to be tours usually held on the day one where everybody is kind of chill, you know, they've just landed or arrived and nobody wants to put on a costume, because I'm gonna tell you, putting on a costume and staying in it all day looks beautiful, but it's a lot of work. What else? Hall costumes also, I think, are here, because not only are you seeing it, you have absolutely every opportunity to walk up to the maker, and the maker really would love to talk about the costume, because they've probably spent a lot of time, and it has been this is the place where we get to talk about it. It's like, oh, this seam is like, oh, well, I hand-did it, It's just super fun. There are material swaps. And then there are show and tells. And show and tells I adore attending, because usually what ends up happening is one of, or both of, the science fiction masquerade and the historical masquerade. These are the two spots where they're likely going to be the most elaborate, labor-intensive, incredible costumes. And what will happen is, at some point towards the end of the show, after these two are over, the makers will bring the costume in and they will then discuss it. So you get to be much closer to the costume. You get to sort of look under the hood and see what the stitching looks like, and so on and so forth. And you get all of the information, you know, about how they attached it, how it works together. And this is also a really useful part of the guild events. So I think that's kind of what I want to say about that. The International Costume Guild is ICG, and it's costume.org. That is their home location on the internet. And I'm just going to leave it here for a second in case you are interested, if you're writing it down or you're taking a screenshot. And then here are the two places on YouTube where the International Costumers Guild exists. One is at costume.org, and the other is at ICG Archives. This is the more active. And by more active, I mean, this has got like 3 followers. I don't understand why. This has got like 79 followers. I don't understand why. But the archives is where they are putting in visual information about the costume, so you can actually see what has been made before. And again, I'm going to leave that up. So what I'm going to do in the second video is I am going to do one of this, which is the show and tell for a costume that I did for the SPC for CostumeCon 38, I think, which was sadly canceled by the pandemic. And in CostumeCon 40, they said, hey, and their numbering system got all screwed up. It's a whole other video. Anyways, they said, hey, if you want to do a video of your costume and submit it remotely, you are welcome to do that. And that's what I did. And so this costume has been shown, and now I am going to do the show and tell part, but it will be in the second video. So I hope you found that interesting, helpful. I'm also going to tag the costume org in the ICG archives, and in the event that anybody who is on the panel thinks that this kind of video show and tell could be part of a larger body of record, I would absolutely support it, and I would happily do my meager contributions to it. I think seeing not only the fantastical labor-intensive costumes is important, but also include a variety, because when you see just one thing, it feels exclusive. It means that, oh, I need to do that before I can be included. And I would say as a commercial that the ICG is incredibly inclusive. They try, it is part of their base mandate that they are welcoming to all people. They are welcoming to all skill levels. They are welcoming to all cultures. And that, I think, is a really important facet of the International Costumers Guild. And particularly the skill levels, because if you are going to grow in your skills, you need to know that you are welcomed as a beginner, you are welcomed as an intermediate, and you are welcomed as a master. And then the, let's call them the grandmasters, then are part of the culture that is passing on that knowledge to the future masters. Anyways, that's my little speech. I'm going to end here, and then we are going to do a cold open with a part 2, which is where we are going to get into my show and tell of SPC Costume Con 38. Thanks so much.